Hello everybody. It's 2 o'clock, so we're going to get started with our webinar today. I'm Kimberly Rauscher, and I'd like to thank you for attending this afternoon's webinar on preventing young worker injuries, sponsored by the Children's Safety Network. Before we get started, Rebecca Wilmer has some information to share on the technology that we're using today. So Rebecca?
Thanks, Kimberly. So there are two options to hear today's audio. You can listen through your computer speakers or call into our phone line at 866-835-7973. If you are participating via phone, please mute your computer speakers to eliminate echo. Phone lines will be muted during the presentation to eliminate background noise. If you have any questions or tech issues, please type them into the Q&A box on the left. The presenters will answer your questions after the presentation. We also have several links today on the left. To visit a web page, you can click on its name and then select the Browse To button. A PDF of the slides is also available in that link pod. This webinar will be recorded and archived and sent out to all registrants after the session. Back to you, Kimberly.
Great. Thank you, Rebecca. So I'm Kimberly Rauscher. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Occupational Environmental Health Sciences at West Virginia University, where I teach a graduate course on occupational injury prevention and conduct research, almost exclusively on young worker health and safety. I received my doctorate from the University of Massachusetts Lowell, the Work Environment Department, and I will be the moderator for today. So today we have the pleasure of hearing from two experts in the area of young worker safety and health from the great state of Massachusetts, Beatriz Pazos Vautin and Sara Rattigan. Beatriz Pazos Vautin is the project coordinator for the Young Workers Injury Surveillance and Prevention Project at the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, where she analyzes data on work-related injuries to youth under age 25. She chairs the Massachusetts Youth Employment and Safety Team and uses data findings to promote action among partners in the community. Prior to joining the Massachusetts Department of Public Health in 2001, she worked at the University of Rochester conducting research on adolescent health and injury prevention. And she received her master's degree in public health from the University of Rochester. Sara Rattigan is the outreach coordinator for the Young Workers Injury Surveillance and Prevention Project, also at Massachusetts DPH, where she works to craft and disseminate effective health messages, materials, and strategies to reduce work-related injuries to youth under age 25. Ms. Rattigan discovered her passion for health promotion as a young worker herself, writing on the health channel of a college news website. Since then, her expertise has expanded to include other creative media outreach, including curricula development and social media strategy. She received her master's degree in health communication from Tufts University School of Medicine. Their presentation today is entitled, Work-Related Injuries Are Happening to Youth. Can we make a difference? Now, I don't mean to play spoiler, but I'm fairly confident the answer is yes, we can make a difference. So please join with me now in hearing about the great work being done in Massachusetts and learning more about how we can all be difference makers in improving young worker health and safety and preventing injuries in this unique population of workers. Beatriz and Sara?
Thank you, Kimberly. So good afternoon and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'd like to start by acknowledging my colleagues on the project, Sara Rattigan, who is presenting with me today, and Tish Davis. I'd also like to thank the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health for funding this work since 1993. Today we will be talking about why we should focus on young workers, what are the risk factors for working teens, our young workers injury surveillance system, looking at some injury statistics, and how we've used the data for action. I will be focusing on teens less than 18 since that was our original emphasis when this project began, but in 2010 we started looking at data to young adults ages 18 to 24 and have just received new funding to expand surveillance and intervention activities to all young workers less than 25. Throughout the presentation, the term teens will be used to describe workers less than 18, young adults will be used to describe workers 18 to 24, and the term young workers refers to all workers less than 25. So before we get started, we'd like to see how many of you know how many young people work in the United States. So youths less than age 25 make up what percent of the workforce? Less than 5%, 5 to 10%, 10 to 15% or greater than 15%. So it looks like most people are leaning towards 10 to 15%, with the vast majority. Or about half, okay. I see some people changing their answers. Okay, great. So it looks like almost 60% of you think that the answer is 10 to 15%. And in fact, you are correct. Work is a common part of lives of many youth in the United States. In 2013, 18.1 million young workers made up 13% of the U.S. workforce. If you ask many Americans, they would tell you that work is beneficial for youth, and they would be right. Work can have many benefits, including learning responsibility, dealing with people, money management, and skill development. Working during high school is often listed as a contributing factor to employment and higher wages later in life. Yet work can be dangerous as well. Nationally, in 2012, there were 375 fatal work-related injuries to young workers. 29 of those were to teens less than 18. Between 1998 and 2007, there was an average of 795,000 work-related injuries a year. As you can see in the chart, young workers have higher rates of non-fatal injuries compared to adults, with the rates of young adults being double that of adults. This is also true nationally. There are risk factors unique to young workers which contribute to these high injury rates. Workers are injured because there are hazards in the workplace. As safety professionals, we should first focus on controlling hazards. Having said this, there are a number of factors that raise concerns about young workers. Many jobs young workers hold are in high-risk industries such as restaurants and healthcare. Inexperience is a risk factor for all workers, and by definition, young workers are inexperienced. Many of them are in their first jobs, and young workers tend to change jobs often. Studies indicate that many teens do not receive health and safety training and have inadequate supervision in the workplace. Teens often are asked to perform tasks that are inappropriate or prohibited under the child labor laws. Development characteristics can also contribute to work-related injuries. Younger teens may not be physically capable of performing the task and are often asked to perform tasks that no one should perform, such as carrying heavy loads. Machinery and personal protective equipment are designed to fit adults, not smaller youth. It is unclear how some chemical exposures may affect a youth's developing body. And lastly, balancing school and work can lead to fatigue and stress, which can contribute to injuries on and off the job. Teens who work long hours may not get enough sleep. They may also have difficulty staying awake in class and have less time to do their homework. Studies have shown working more than 20 hours a week can have a negative impact on school. These teens may also use stimulants more, partly to stay awake, and experience more stress than those that don't work. The Department of Public Health study in the late 1980s, using emergency department data to examine childhood injuries in Massachusetts, revealed high rates of work-related injuries to teens. Further analysis of workers' compensation data identified large numbers of youth per year filing claims for serious injuries. This led the department in 1993 to promulgate new quarantine regulations, which included work-related injuries to persons less than 18. This required hospitals and all healthcare providers to report injuries to the department. These regulations have recently been amended to provide DPH with access to medical information on injuries to workers of all ages, thus allowing us to expand the surveillance system. Also that year, DPH received funding from the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health to conduct surveillance of work-related injuries to teens. There are 3 goals of the Young Workers Project. The first is to identify sentinel cases. Sentinel cases are used to target work sites for follow-up, gather more information about the circumstances of the injury, and provide case studies. The second is to generate summary data to target broad-based prevention efforts. And the third goal is to use the data to promote prevention activities at both the state and the local levels. Now, this may look busy, but this is a flowchart of the surveillance system. We collect data through workers' compensation claims filed for injuries resulting in 5 or more lost work days, a sample of emergency departments, the burn registry, and the DPH work-related fatalities surveillance system, and statewide hospitalization and emergency department data sets. We conduct interviews with a sample of select cases chosen based on injury or industry. Youth we interview are given educational materials as a follow-up to participating in our interview. Once a year, we conduct the mailing to all employers we have identified as having had an injury in the prior year with information about the child labor laws and health and safety resources available to employers. We have also conducted investigations of workplaces and referred violations of child labor laws to the Massachusetts Office of the Attorney General or the U.S. Department of Labor Wage and Hour Division for enforcement. We will also refer a case to the Occupational Safety and Health Administration when an OSHA standard has been violated. The data are also analyzed and results are disseminated through annual reports and educational materials. The data are then used to guide our broad-based prevention activities by us and our partners. The next few slides will contain Massachusetts data collected by our surveillance system. This slide shows the distribution of injuries to teens by injury type and data source. As I mentioned before, the workers' compensation data are for indemnity claims filed when a worker is injured seriously enough to miss 5 or more work days. They do not include medical-only claims. They are represented by the white bar on the graph. The emergency department data comes from the statewide database containing all emergency department visits. Cases are identified using workers' compensation as the expected payer and are identified by the blue bars on the graph. This is a classic surveillance slide of what you look at determines what you see. If you look at the emergency department data, you would see that open wounds are the leading injury, whereas if you looked at the workers' compensation data, you would see that sprains, strains, and tears are the leading injury type. Intuitively, this makes sense since open wounds are more likely treated in the emergency room and do not often require missing 5 days of work. Sprains are less likely to be treated in the emergency room, but often do require several days away from work. You need to use multiple data sources to get at the full extent of the problem, or if using only one source, understand its limitations. Around 40% of those sprains were to the back, which is concerning since back injuries often lead to future back injuries. There were 12 amputations included in the other category during this time period, and there have been 14 fatalities to teens since 1993. 4 of the teens were working with or for their father at the time of the injury. In the field of occupational safety, disparities by race and ethnicity are well recognized. Immigrant and minority workers are more likely to be employed in high-risk jobs. In looking at the Massachusetts data on working teens, we don't see a difference between blacks and whites, but we do see higher rates among our Hispanic working teens. Looking at average annual rates by workers' compensation claims, we see that restaurants and nursing homes both had higher than average rates of injury, yet there were fewer injuries in nursing homes than in restaurants. Nursing homes and healthcare in general is the only industry where females have higher rates of injury than males. There are challenges getting the numerator and denominator to match in public administration, so that rate could be overinflated, and social assistants are mainly daycare centers where their teens are working and being injured. Both the numbers and rates are important to consider when targeting our prevention efforts. We also consider other factors such as where we have partners who can make a difference. Here are some data from our interviews with injured teens over the last few years. While the data may not be representative of all injured teens, the interviews identify compelling gaps. Almost 50% reported receiving no health and safety training at work. Nearly a quarter were working without a work permit, which is required in Massachusetts. This number has actually dropped from 33% in recent years. 15% said that there was no supervisor anywhere on the premises at the time of their injury. These are not minor injuries. Over 20% anticipated having a permanent effect from the injury, defined as permanent pain, limited sensation, or a loss of movement. Over half of the teens believed that their injury was preventable, and many of them believed that it was something that they could have done to prevent it. This data is based on reading the narratives in the interviews of approximately 800 cases and helps tell the story of what is occurring in the workplace. 10% reported that the equipment being used was malfunctioning or a safety device had been removed. Here's a quote showing the owner had been told about broken equipment and didn't fix it. 9% appeared to be performing a task or working hours prohibited under the child labor laws. Here are 2 examples of such child labor law violations. 10% waited a day or more before seeking medical treatment. This is a very typical example of what we see in the data. Often the parents tell the teens they need to go to the doctor once the teen arrives home after completing their shift. 4% of adolescents reported that their supervisors made them stay at work even once the injury occurred. Teens usually do what is asked of them and do not question their supervisors or speak up for themselves in the workplace. Switching now to the young adult data, we see that once again, open wounds are the leading type of injury in emergency department data. However, there are more sprains and less burns in this age group. There were 177 amputations in the other category, and there were 14 fatalities during this time period. Again, looking at rates of hospitalizations for work-related injuries, we see that Hispanic young adults have significantly higher rates of hospitalizations due to a work-related injury than white non-Hispanics. Hispanics also had higher rates than whites in the emergency department data, but it was not a significant difference. And now I'm going to turn it over to Sara, who is going to talk about how we have used the data in our prevention work.
Okay, and as we move on to this next section, we want to do another poll. So just to learn a little bit more about who's listening. So the question is, my organization is currently involved in the following activities related to preventing injuries to young workers. Collecting, analyzing, and producing data, programmatic efforts, advocacy, interagency coalition. And other. And it looks like there's a pretty good mix. All right. That's looking great. Thanks. So let's move on. So it looks like we have people involved in a lot of different activities, as our project is involved in a lot of different activities. And we're going to talk about some of those activities now. And we're going to start off by, let me just introduce the 3 E's framework in introducing our activities: education, enforcement, policy change, and environments and engineering. And just a quick overview of this. On the ladder of occupational health and safety, education is clearly a necessity to keep people, including workers, informed with important information and provided with skills that can help reduce injuries. Policy change is one rung higher on that ladder, in that there's often some kind of enforceable standard in place with penalties on the line for those who don't adhere. And environmental or engineering change with the intent of eliminating the hazard altogether is the ultimate goal. So a lot of our data is disseminated in the form of reports and educational materials, and over the years we've developed a lot of different materials for a lot of different audiences. Here is just a sample of some of them. I'm not going to go into detail on all of these, but you can see we have things for employers, for youth themselves, for parents, for educators. I do want to highlight just one product, which is the Talking Safety Curriculum, which you'll see in the upper left-hand corner. I'll just point to it here. And this is a national health and safety curriculum designed for high schools and other classroom settings. And the curriculum is actually based on a version originally created in Massachusetts and one in California during the 1990s. It is a 3-hour, really participatory curriculum, again, for high school age students. It covers a lot of different things, including hazards in the workplace, worker rights, how to speak up for your rights. And in addition to the general version of the curriculum, our project has also developed versions specific to food service and healthcare service, as well as a supplementary lesson on workplace sexual harassment. And over the years, we've done many train-the-trainer workshops for high school teachers on this curriculum. We're also really pleased that beginning in 2010, our partner Commonwealth Corporation, which is a quasi-state agency who administers the Massachusetts state-funded job placement programs for youth in our state, added language to their funding agreement that requires any program receiving funds to provide health and safety training to all participants. And they strongly encourage the use of talking safety to meet that requirement. So while this educational program change technically falls under enforcement and policy change, I mention it here because it's tied to the Talking Safety curriculum. In addition to Commonwealth Corporation, which I just mentioned, we have many state and federal partners. The agencies listed here are part of what we now like to call our YES team, the Massachusetts Youth Employment and Safety Team. But for over 10 years, this group has met regularly and collaborated on a number of initiatives. A few examples include coordinating referrals for enforcement activity, revising the state's work permit process, and a couple of bigger awareness campaigns, including an outreach campaign about 2007 revisions to the Massachusetts child labor laws. This was a professional campaign funded by the state's Office of the Attorney General. There was a website, there were posters, other media, and the YES team really worked together to get this information out among the public. The YES teams also worked with our community partner MassCosh, the Massachusetts Coalition for Occupational Safety and Health, to coordinate a statewide teen poster contest. And this contest culminates in an award ceremony at the State House each year. Here's a photo of this past year's award ceremony. And I think this has been one of our most integrative public awareness initiatives. It brings together teens and their families, state agencies, community partners, even state legislators. It brings these groups all together to help start a conversation about workplace health and safety for youth. And here's just a quick glance at the first place posters from the past 5 years of the contest. In that time period, we've had nearly 650 teens submit entries to the contest, and over 280 youth from across the state serve as judges for the contest. And MassCosh has also been able to get the winning poster up on public transportation in Boston for the past 4 years. Moving on to some of our enforcement and policy change successes. Our project has a longstanding relationship with the state's Office of Vocational Education, which has allowed us to conduct research-based investigations of shop and co-op placement injuries. The educational alert you see here on the slide was the result of a case we investigated where a teen had several fingers amputated while using an unguarded table saw. And our recommendations from the investigation led to several new safety policies by the Office of Vocational Education. It led to the addition of health and safety as a competency strand in the vocational curriculum frameworks. It led to new vocational programs needing to have a safety inspection as part of the certification process, and there are also now health and safety requirements for teachers as part of continuing education. Another issue, workplace violence. So in the mid-2000s, there was a tragic case of an 18-year-old convenience store worker who was sadly killed while chasing a shoplifter who had stolen just a few tubes of toothpaste. And it really brought home the issue of workplace violence affecting Massachusetts youth. Beatriz was able to participate in our health department's committee to develop a statewide strategic plan to reduce youth violence. And as a result of her having a voice at the table, workplace violence was included in that final plan. So once in place, the strategic plan made grant funds available, which allowed our partner MassCosh's teen peer leader group to apply for funds to conduct a youth leadership academy on workplace health and safety. And this included youth violence. And the academy brought together teams of teens from across the state. They'd attend a conference and they'd go back to their community to implement a campaign of their choosing. And so this is all stemming from the strategic plan. And our data has also helped lead to change in Massachusetts laws. You'll remember I mentioned the 2007 awareness campaign funded by the Office of the Attorney General. Well, MassCosh did a lot of work in helping to make those changes happen, and they were actually able to use our data as one tool to help present a compelling case to state legislators about the need for more stringent child labor protections for minors. In 2007, the highlights you see listed here went into effect. And finally, environment and engineering change. So Again, the ultimate goal here is eliminating the hazard altogether. And for this category, I'm going to share a case study of one of our most recent successes resulting from many, many years of outreach. Our project's role in promoting engineering change for safer equipment in coffee shops. So back in 1998, there was an injury to a 14-year-old employee in a coffee shop that was part of a national chain. And this incident, circumstances surrounding this incident were serious enough that it helped to focus our attention on the retail bakery industry, which before now hadn't really been identified as high risk for Massachusetts working youth. So when our project took a closer look, our surveillance data revealed both high rates and high numbers of injuries to teens working in this industry. And looking specifically at coffee shops, the proportion of burn injuries to teens was greater than all other types of injuries. Further analysis revealed that close to 60% of all the burn cases we were seeing were among teens working for coffee shops in a single large franchised retail bakery chain, the same one that the 14-year-old happened to work for. And as you can see in this graph, half of all the injuries to teens working in establishments for the national chain were burn injuries compared to 30% in other coffee shop establishments. So what was going on in the national chain that was putting teens at such risk for burn injuries? A small sample of follow-up interviews with teens who had been burned in these establishments helped to identify hot coffee as the leading cause, and we also conducted several investigations of work sites to look at the work environment and talk to employees. And as it turned out, similar events were happening in many of these cases. Basically, a worker would go to make a new pot of coffee and pull out the brew basket to change the filter, which you can see circled in this photo. But the coffee machine hadn't finished brewing, and so the filter still had near boiling water in it and coffee grounds sitting in it. And when the worker pulled, hot coffee slurry would splash back over their hand and wrist, causing up to third-degree burns. In 2000, we gained an opportunity to share our findings at a meeting that included hundreds of franchise owners as well as corporate staff from this national chain. And it actually turned out that some of the franchise owners had been aware of the problems with the brew baskets, but the summary data that we presented revealing the pattern of burn injuries was what was so compelling to them, and it was compelling to the corporate office who prescribes the equipment that is used in the franchise locations. It was actually compelling enough that it got corporate to work with their equipment manufacturer on new coffee brew basket designs. And a few years later, again, circled in this photo, you can see that there was a lip added to the brew baskets, and the idea was that the lip would prevent coffee slurry from splashing back over the hands if brew baskets were pulled out prematurely. But over the course of many years, even after the new brew basket was introduced, our data were still showing the same kind of burn injuries occurring in these national chain coffee shops. And I show these two quotes from our data just to emphasize how similar all of the narratives were. It was the same series of events over and over again. I was changing the coffee filter, but I didn't realize it was still going. I was pulling out the coffee filter to make more coffee, but it was still brewing. And since 2011, again, this is a very long story. Since 2011, we've continued to make progress on the issue. We've met one-on-one with corporate to discuss solutions, including the idea of an interlock design for coffee machines, which would prevent the baskets from being pulled out too soon. And this time around, after our meeting, we documented the meeting and our recommendations and sent a copy to the corporate headquarters office. Since the 2011 meeting, corporates worked with their manufacturer again to design a hopefully safer coffee machine. And in 2014, the new machine was rolled out. To date, at least 3,000 brewers have been purchased for around 1,200 locations nationwide. And the new machine does feature an interlock, as we recommended and had actually recommended nearly 15 years earlier. But it means the brew basket is locked in place until the coffee machine is finished brewing its cycle, so it can't be pulled out mid-cycle while it's still full of hot water and grounds, hopefully helping to eliminate the hazard. It's too soon yet to know the impact of the new design, but we're hopeful it's going to reduce this kind of burn injury, not just for teens, but for all the workers who work in this national chain's franchise locations. The potential for impact is over 13,000 franchise locations wide. So our outreach on this issue began in 1999, and 15 years later, there's hopefully a safer machine on the market. And I show this timeline just to emphasize how long it took, which can be discouraging in some respects, but also encouraging that perseverance can pay off in the long run. So can we make a difference? Well, I hope the case study I just shared is evidence of that, but let's look at some other measures to demonstrate the impact that can be made. There's nothing better than data to illustrate impact. This graph shows that the rate of injuries for teen workers in Massachusetts has not only dropped over the past 20 years since our project began, but has also dropped faster than the rate for adults. So for teens ages 15 to 17, we see a 47% decline overall compared to 40% for adults 18 and older. You'll notice a small uptake for teens around 2011, but it's still an overall decline. And of course, we can't directly attribute the decline to our work, but we like to think we've contributed to it. It's not often, though, that you have data like this to demonstrate impact. So what other measures are there? It looks like we may have missed. Okay, well, anyway, we've started to use social media. So we're going to do another poll just to see how many of you might be using social media as well. It's something we've added recently because, you know, youth are online, so we figured let's take a look. So what are all you using? Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter? None. I see leaning towards Facebook and Twitter, which is predicted. Facebook nationally is the top media for all age groups, including the young people. Okay, so that's a good, so Twitter and Facebook standing out. That's actually not what we're using completely, but not because we can't. Okay. All right, sorry about that. So before I go on to the social media, don't worry, it'll come back. We mixed up our slides. We use web analytics to measure our reach. I'm sure many of you do as well. But in regard to our educational materials, each year we get requests for thousands of them, largely due to a couple peak outreach efforts that we make each year. And the first one is our poster contest, which I mentioned earlier. It's announced in October, and the award ceremony is in March. If you look at the blue line of the poster contest, you'll see spikes in October and March. And the second is the dissemination of our surveillance update each April, which leads into the end of the school year when everyone's thinking about summer jobs. And you'll notice the white line starts to go up around March and straight through June. So that's what this graph is showing you. And I pulled out a team guide to illustrate our surveillance update because it's our most requested educational material by adults who work with youth. We get 5,000 to 6,000 material requests for this a year. So that's why I pulled that one out. And for the poster contest, even though I'm just showing you the web pages, the web hits to the poster contest page, our analytics also show that people go to other pages on our website. So it's really helpful to us in knowing that while doing the poster contest, it's not just the contest that people are accessing, they're accessing our other materials as well. And then back to social media. Again, we've added social media because everyone's on social media, including the people who work with youth, not just the youth. So we thought we had to take advantage of it. So we regularly blog, use Twitter, and write feature stories. We don't use Facebook right now just because it's a little bit more difficult with the kind of work we do. And our health department already has a blog and Twitter and homepage that we can take advantage of without creating our own accounts. And I wanted to show you some metrics of our social media impact too, in case it's useful for you in thinking about your outreach activities. Since we've added strategized social media, we've seen our already web hits skyrocket. This slide gives you an idea of how social media can help raise awareness beyond just your traditional outreach activities. So in this graph, you can see a huge increase in hits to our overall web pages and again to our guide for working teens. And it grows, increase in hits grows each year that we use social media more strategically. And this is just a fun slide that I want to share because we thought it was pretty cool in 2013 when our governor retweeted our first place winning poster from our poster contest. Just a highlight to end on. Before moving to the conclusion, but in conclusion, I guess I hope that those of you who are less familiar with this issue before you joined us this afternoon, I hope that we've demonstrated to you that injuries to young workers are happening and that it's an ongoing public health problem that needs to be addressed, not just in Massachusetts, but across the country. And we really feel that we have an obligation to protect young workers. But we also think that in doing so, we have a really great opportunity to provide them with a range of skills that are going to prepare them for even better success in their future careers. Second, I hope we've been able to give some examples of different ways that statistics can be paired with stories to help influence stakeholders and other decision makers. You have to have the summary data to illustrate the broader public health problem. You have to have it for funding purposes. You have to have it for the more analytic side of how people think and process and understand information. But the stories, if you can find them, are what really hit a nerve once you've got someone's attention. So it's a combination of those two things that can help compel others to take action. Third, we'd like well, we all know that change can take time, but our project has learned over the past 20 years that it can often take even more time than we think. So that's been an important reminder for us about the necessity of patience and perseverance. You saw the timeline for the coffee machine change. That work started long before I even joined the project, and we didn't even go into how long it took to revise the child labor laws in Massachusetts. But change can be achieved when you don't let go of initiatives that you begin. And then finally, most of the successes we've shared today wouldn't have been possible without collaboration with and contributions from a wide range of partners. Some of those partnerships were natural links, some were more strategic in nature, some required a lot more groundwork and getting to know you periods before they really formed relationships. But all of the relationships that we've made have allowed us to work more strategically and more efficiently and a lot more quickly than if we were doing it alone. And we've also made some great friends along the way, which can be a needed laugh or cry, given what's going on when things get challenging. So that's what we have for you today. We hope the information that we've shared has been useful, and we'd love to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Beatriz and Sara. This is really excellent, and we've learned so much already today. So yes, let's now open things up to questions. The last bullet was about partnerships, so I thought I'd start with a question about the role of sort of career exploration programs. So we have a couple of questions on that area, so I'm going to combine them. The first is, what is your opinion on on-the-job exploration opportunities of internships, co-ops, job shadowing, apprentice initiatives, and how can they be helpful? And what suggestions do you have for career services in the community for preparing youth to enter the workforce?
Sure. So in thinking about on-the-job exploration opportunities, I think career exploration programs, this is Sara speaking, can provide youth with a lot of valuable workplace experience. They're able to learn about different careers. It's an opportunity to provide them information with the different hazards associated with those careers and with what kind of safety measures could be in place. So I think they're important, and they're also really great opportunities to kind of build in that health and safety information we hope all youth are getting. Oh, and okay, so also, sorry, I missed the second part of the question. For career services in the community, I guess one of the materials we didn't talk about in depth on our little education slide is called the Safe Jobs for Youth Manual, and we developed it to help vocational school cooperative education placement coordinators. We mentioned we have a long-standing relationship with that community, but the guide actually could be useful to any groups that are working to help place youth in jobs. It's basically a guide that helps non-safety professionals understand what to look for in a work site regarding health and safety when they're placing a youth. It comes with checklists of things to watch out for during a worksite walkthrough, questions to ask employers to better understand the safety culture in a workplace, sample contracts to use with students and employers, things like that. And we also mentioned it's not exactly the same thing as career services, but the summer jobs programs in Massachusetts now require health and safety training for all youth. I think a career services type organization would be great, and even if they can't provide something more formal like a talking safety training, even just providing access to information that introduces youth to the idea of health and safety is important, because while employers are supposed to provide training, they don't always provide as much information as youth need.
Great. There's a natural follow-up, which is about, is the talking safety curriculum and your other educational materials available for use by other states, or are they Massachusetts specific? Could you talk about that curriculum a little bit?
Sure. The Talking Safety curriculum, there's actually a link on the NIOSH website, and they have created a general version for every state in the country. And mainly the difference is just that the different versions include the child labor laws that are specific to that individual state, since each state is different. But with the exception of that lesson, the curriculum are basically the same from state to state. We do have some specific versions that we've developed in Massachusetts. We have the food service and the culinary arts, and the healthcare services, which we developed in the sexual harassment lesson, but those could also be transferred to any state. They are not Massachusetts specific. And most of our educational materials and resources, other than the child labor laws, would be able to be applied to any other state and could be adapted to the laws in your state. And all of that is available either on our website or the NIOSH website. If you look over on the web links, you'll see them to the left of your screen.
Great. Thank you. And continuing on the line of partnerships and getting some resources, there's a question, do you know of the OSHA 21D consultation programs and their efforts on young worker safety training?
Yep, we actually, our OSHA consultation program in Massachusetts is run out of our Department of Labor Standards, which, if you remember, was one of the members of our YES team. So we have partnered with them before. I don't know what other states' programs are doing, but I know federal OSHA has conducted special emphasis programs on youth before and continues to develop new materials and has a webpage dedicated just for youth. And I know oftentimes what national OSHA emphasizes the regional offices, and then often the consultation programs will run similar ones at the same time.
Okay, great. There's another question. Can you share who some of your best partners have been?
I would say we probably have lots of different partners depending on what we're doing that have been great. I mean, obviously being able to work with an employer and get them to make a change to equipment in their workplace is an example that you would be lucky to have, and we were fortunate to be able to work with them, and so they've been our great partner with that, working with the Attorney General and getting that lawsuit started that they were bringing at that time also helped put that relationship in place. But working with our COSH Association, with the Teens Lead at Work program through MassCOSH, has just been an incredible resource to have even a teen's perspective and a youth's perspective, working with them to help use them as focus groups to help guide some of our education materials, collaborating on a youth voice, hearing from them, getting access to other youth, running stories by them, and just, even being inspired by the educational campaigns and political campaigns that they've done over the years has been a great resource and an incredible experience for us.
Great. Another question is, what advice do you have for a state that is just starting to work on this issue? Other than be patient, right? As we learn, it takes time. What advice would you have?
I would say one of the the two places that I would start if I were a new state would be, one, to look through the NIOSH expanded surveillance in occupational health. 26 states have just received a new round of funding to conduct occupational surveillance in their states, not all of which are focusing on youth. I think there's only one or two of us that are doing it. But you can see if your state is one of those states that received funding, and you might have an opportunity to partner with the people that have the grants to look at youth injuries in your state. And then there's also the networks through the Young Worker Network nationally is a great resource for learning about what state partners might be doing related around prevention and intervention activities. There are many organizations that are already working with the talking safety curriculums. I think Oklahoma just passed legislation requiring talking safety in their state for high school students, and so there is some work going around in the states around prevention. And then, your COSH groups, if you have a COSH group in your state, might be interested in looking at young workers in particular.
That's great. Somebody also asked the question whether you found it difficult to get policymakers to take this issue seriously, or if they've been easily convinced to adopt this as an issue, see this as important.
It's hard. We're limited, so this is an example of where MassCOSH has been incredibly instrumental. The Office of the Attorney General can do a certain amount of work to help get policy change at that level, but MassCOSH and the peer leader group are the ones who really are able to go out and push the issue. We're less able to, in our position as a surveillance program within the State Department of Public Health, to do that. And it's, I'm just going to say, occupational health and safety is always, it's always a tricky issue politically. So I don't know if Beatriz.
That being said, though, in terms of making a difference, getting our voice has been a little bit harder, but yet since we have been conducting the award ceremonies at the State House, all of the legislators that are in the districts represented by the finalists and the winners are invited to attend, and most of them will give citations and issue certificates to the finalists for participating. They may mention it in their newsletters. They come out, they take pictures, they use it as photo ops, and so that aspect of it has been very well received. We usually don't hear anything from the legislators complaining about it or not wanting to attend or taking a political stance at that point. So they've been very supportive of the teams that have come out to raise a voice about the issue.
Yeah, and actually I will add one thing too, and also thinking about social media. So we've started, again, I said, to use social media more strategically in the past year or so. And we will notice, if we track our analytics on Twitter and stuff, we will see some state legislators retweeting these issues as we promote it as a blog post. So the interest is out there, and I think it's finding the more creative ways of promoting the issue in a way that's not so much I don't know, just finding a way that resonates with the legislators, that makes it a little more just an issue that everyone cares about, kind of making it relate more to the state.
Great. We also have a question about resources and funding to do this work, and I know you did mention briefly about how your program at DPH in Massachusetts is funded, but the participant asks, can you address funding issues both for surveillance and prevention, and how are your efforts funded, and do you have suggestions for where states can go for funding?
Sure. As I mentioned, we are funded through NIOSH to conduct the surveillance portion of it, and our surveillance grants cover the prevention activities that we do. We actually have not received any prevention funding, but I know from some of our partners in other states, NIOSH also will do research grants if people are interested in doing, some research and surveys on young workers. There's also the Susan B. Harwood OSHA grants, which allow for some like training and education and prevention activities. And then in the construction setting, the Center for Protecting Workers' Rights, CPWR, I know also does some grant funding.
Great. One of our participants has asked about the role of parents and how they can become involved. Do you have any recommendations for how parents can get involved, and what is the appropriate role of a parent of a working teen?
Yeah, so we actually have an educational material guide for working parents on some of the things that parents can do. I think one of the, and I'm going to let Beatriz jump in at any time, but I think one of the biggest things parents can do is being aware of the types of work their teens are doing and asking them questions about what they are supposed to be doing, paying attention to the hours they're working, asking about supervision on the job, just being familiar with what they're doing. I know growing up, I had a lot of jobs, and my parents asked some questions, but I think for the most part they didn't really have a clue as to what I was doing at work, and I didn't really talk about it because they didn't ask.
I think that's actually when parents kind of feel like they want to let their children be responsible in the workforce, and that's great, but I think they then feel uncomfortable asking questions. They kind of just assume that there's somebody in the workforce taking care of them. I know working as a teen and watching my younger sister work as a teen, she was a waitress very often, and my parents showed up at every single one of our workplaces all the time to find out exactly like what we were doing. You know, they conveniently went out to dinner the night that it was our shift, and made sure they knew the owners and who we were working with, and and stuff like that. And they weren't very subtle about it. We knew what they were doing, but I think they were kind of unique in the fact that many parents tend to just let the teens work and take for granted that there's not going to be any harm or that they're going to know everything that happens in the workplace to them.
I'll also just kind of give a shout out. In Massachusetts, we have a work permit that's required for teens under 18. I didn't know about that when I was young, but that's something parents can do, is find out if their state requires a work permit, and if so, that is one way of finding out what their teen is going to be doing at the job.
Well, that's a perfect segue into our next question, which is about work permits. And I know you can speak to what happens in Massachusetts, not necessarily in every state, but our viewer has asked, what actually happens with the work permit? Who issues it, and what do employers do with it? Maybe you can talk a little bit about the process in Massachusetts for obtaining work permits.
Sure. Yes, as Kimberly alluded to, it is different state to state, so we cannot talk to that experience. But in Massachusetts, if you are 14 or 15, you need to obtain a educational certificate work permit, which is basically the same process as a work permit, only you also need a physician's signature. And so then for everybody less than 18, 14, 15, 16, or 17, you need to get a job offer from an employer. Then you can now either go online or go to your school and download the application for the permit. And that's what gets signed by your parents. It gets signed by your employer with a job description of what you're going to be doing. And then if you are 14 or 15 and need that physician signature, your physician signs that piece of paper. And with the 2007 change in the law, there also is now a copy of the child labor laws attached to the work permit that you're supposed to sign, that your parents and you have read the child labor laws, as well as the employer. And then that form is taken to the superintendent or their designee in the school district, either in which you attend or which you live. And then they will issue a work permit, which you take back to your employer. Your employer is supposed to keep it on the premises for the course of your employment. And then once you cease working there, send it back to the school.
Thank you. There's a couple of people who've watched today that are interested in agricultural injuries, and some folks want to know about what resources are out there, data resources or maybe materials on prevention of agricultural injuries to youth. But could you also just say whether or not there are agricultural injuries in your data in Massachusetts, and maybe talk a little bit about the resources that we want to share with people?
Sure. Yeah, we did not cover agriculture because we do not see it in our Massachusetts data. We are a very non-agriculture state, although there is some of it. And so there are actually separate sets of laws that apply to youth working in agriculture versus those not working in agriculture. And there are great resources and educational materials developed. If the one place I would probably start is either the NIOSH has a topic page on agricultural injury prevention for youth. There's also the OSHA resource has a page on their youth in agriculture. And there is the National Children's Center for Rural and Agricultural Health and Safety from the Marshfield Clinic, and I know that's a lot, so we have posted links to all of them under the web links for people that want more information. You can pull the links to any of those topic pages down from there and get more information after the webinar.
That's great. And one of our participants I was going to say texted, just wrote in saying that Farm Safety for Just Kids is also a resource that's out there. And that is Farm Safety, the letter for Just Kids. We don't have a link, but we can find that and get that up for everybody. I think we maybe have time for just one or two more questions. A few that are related, asking about patterns of work for youth, and one is whether or not. One question is whether your data reflect the changes in the employment numbers for young workers over the years, and I know you did present a lot of rates. So if you could just speak to that, but also whether or not there are, to speak to some of the changes in the employment where kids are working, the different types of work that they're doing. There's a lot of new technology out there, and if you could just speak to, what are kids doing today?
Sure. Great questions. As Kimberly alluded to, so I'll first cover the employment data. And when you just look at numbers of employments, then that fluctuates and can go year to year. But the slide that Sara presented about when we can make a difference, and we showed the annual rates and the decline in the injury rates over time and how they are declining, that actually takes into account for changes in the number of teams working year to year. That's one of the advantages of calculating it out as the rate and presenting it that way, is that it will adjust for that automatically in the calculation. And so we do see that. However, we think that in that graph where Sara mentioned that there was that little blip of the rates starting to come back, we think that that might be due to some of the post-recession and more teams working again. Even though the numbers themselves shouldn't adjust for it, we just think that there's more teams back in the workforce. And then in terms of where are they working and the question about new technology and stuff, we actually have not really seen that reflected in our data. The workplaces at teams have typically been the same, restaurants, retail, grocery stores, healthcare. And I think part of that is because the employment status and the things that teams are doing now is different and kind of considered more informal from what we hear about, even like the job shadowing and internships and mentoring programs through our partners at the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, is that teens are starting to do a lot more like self-employed. They're kind of starting to start up their own businesses and do their own things, and that those jobs would not show up in the data because they're not formal employment relationships. They're working for themselves and not working for somebody else, so they wouldn't be getting work permits. They wouldn't be getting workers' compensation. They wouldn't be showing up in that data source. So it's kind of hard to get a real grasp on where they are, but that's what the sense that I'm getting for where the workforce is changing and why it's not showing up in our data.
That's great. Yeah. Well, we are pretty much at time, and I would like to thank Beatriz and Sara very much for sharing their work with us today. And I think you've certainly demonstrated in a very concrete manner the ways in which we can make a difference in reducing young worker injury. And thank you to everybody who participated in this webinar today. We hope you've enjoyed the presentation and that you've gained some helpful takeaways that you can apply in your own work. One thing that I would like to mention is that there's a young worker listserv for anybody who's interested in this topic. And if you'd like to join, you can email Mary Miller, and she will take care of signing you up. And her email address, which I'm not sure we'll be able to post her email address, so it is MARYMILL at uw.edu. So that's basically Mary Miller without the ER at uw.edu, and she can get you on the injury listserv. So lastly, I'd just like to ask everybody if they could just take a few minutes to go and complete the online evaluation of today's webinar. You can click on the link on the slide and it'll take you directly to the evaluation tool. So again, thank you to the Children's Safety Network for sponsoring this webinar, to our speakers for sharing their work and insights with us, and to all of you who have participated in this webinar today. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, everybody. Thank you.